The following is for psychos only. During the pandemic, I was so frustrated creatively, and I think we were all feeling this itch, this boredom, this drive. It wasn't like I was selling scripts at that time, and it occurred to me, should I finish the story of American Alien? I had always had a rough plan for what I wanted to do with Superman and American Alien. Now, this rough plan featured a lot of different plot points that I wasn't sure how I'd get to them because it was so much bigger and more expansive than American Alien, which was deliberately a collection of 7 smaller, more character-based stories. Even though some of them did hint that this version of the DCU, my version, might be a little bit bigger than the simplicity of American Alien implied. Now, this started with Agent of Batman because I asked the internet. I hadn't posted anything in a long time. And I said, do you want to hear the next story of American Alien? And they said yes in my YouTube community posts, which I don't know how many people even use that function, but I've been very impressed at the interactivity on it. And so I started what became a 5-year DIY art project to try to finish this fan fiction in a way that made it feel both satisfying to me from a craft perspective and also different and bigger than other fan films or fan projects, while at the same time being infinitely smaller and more niche. The Kryptonian Epic was always really for the people who'd enjoy it. You know, I've often been a figure of ridicule online because I've at times been a little bit of an asshole and at times been a little bit ridiculous. Maybe my whole life been a little bit ridiculous. But what's always impressed me is relatively how warmly the Kryptonian Epic, which features me telling stories, dressing up in costumes, doing silly voices, doing deliberately bad and slipshod production because that was sort of the ethos of it. Just kind of, not even Dogma 99, but almost more like Dogville, Von Trier. Just this minimalist, weird style of storytelling, surrealist style of storytelling. And I promised myself, I made a commitment to myself. I have a tattoo that's a pledge, more rock, less talk. If you start something, finish it. If you see something in your life you want to change it. I promised myself I would finish the Kryptonian Epic. And this journey brought in these incredible people. Ben Escobar is an editor, a guy I met online, became one of my best friends. Alberto Borsato did all the music for the Epic and is a genius. Is just a genius who followed me on Instagram and ultimately did hours and hours of incredible original superhero score for me and epic score and electronic music. And it was just one of the best experiences of my whole life. Now, there's still 2 pieces of the Epic to come. Whatever Happened to the Last Son of Krypton and Green Lantern, Outbound Flight. But both of them function as epilogues. The epic story, meant to mimic other giant fantasy epics, the epic story is finished. It finished with Superman the Starlight Emperor, which means it's time, finally, to do the gigantic epic Q&A. So next to my Carly Rae Jepsen content, this is maybe the most niche content on this channel. Is just going to be me answering all the questions I was asked. And because my assistant didn't collate who asked them, I'm going to be answering questions from the same people again and again. So for some of my followers, this is going to be like I'm having a conversation directly with you. But for everyone else, this is a lot of insight and information into the thinking and ideas behind the Kryptonian Epic and how it came to be what it is. I have my sugar-free Red Bull, which is, of course, the fuel that fuels the Kryptonian Epic and contributes significantly to my mental health when combined with sativa and a convertible. But I've left those 2 elements on the table, and I'm going to start answering questions right now. So Mika Pickering, 1806, asks, how did you conceive your version of Kent Nelson? Well, my Dr. Fate is one of the characters who's the most different from his typical conception. And that's because I needed him for a specific thing. I needed a character who engaged holistically with the prophecies of the Kryptonian Epic. There are a lot of different sort of fate feeling things in the epic. Even if Zatanna is the only outright magical character, there are a number of coincidences or situations that echo throughout the story again and again, moments that are presented the same but in a new way again and again throughout the story, a lot of recurrence, a lot of re-examination of earlier characters' choices. And I thought it would be really great to have a guy who's been on the outside just watching that. And Armand Hardcastle, I didn't end up using him much in the spoken epic, but he sort of serves that role for the good guys, whereas Kent Nelson, Dr. Fate, serves that role for the bad guys. And I felt that character's place in mythology, his place adjacent to myth and legend, made him an interesting pull. And also, I used the helm in Whatever Happened to the Last Son of Krypton. Spoilers, Dr. Fate is indeed very heavily featured in the epilogue, Whatever Happened to the Last Son of Krypton. Wolfman Jack asks, money and power are big themes. Were you tempted to foreground Queen's or others' politics more, or is it better as subtext? The politics of the epic are super interesting because they're very, 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 very humanist, and a lot of times they kind of deny engagement with different socioeconomic strata on a deeper level. And that's because most of the people we're engaging with exist in a scary place where they are beyond politics. The protagonists of the epic, the protagonists of the Kryptonian Epic at various junctures are the most important people on Earth and figure into the fate of humanity. So while Ted is raised as a black conservative, who has a cop father who's very cruel to him, but teaches him that the world is a mean place and you have to protect yourself and you have to protect the people close to you. And that's ultimately what matters more than anything else. You can't fix the world. The world's broken. The best thing you can do is look out for number one and everyone who matters to you. And so that leads to Ted in resentment of his father, not taking care of himself at all, but becoming a police officer. And ultimately, that leads to misery as a police officer, which leads to him creating the Blue Beetle, which leads to him socializing Bloodhaven and creating Beetle Coin, which is money that you make by generating energy on your Beetle risk communicator, by getting on a treadmill and helping generate energy for any number of the public utilities in Bloodhaven. So like if you get on the Beetle hover transports, you're donating the energy it takes to get you to your stop. So Ted would have never implemented that intentionally as a political statement. It's how he figures out is the easiest way to democratize the Blue Beetle technology. Because Ted's whole thing is, sure, a superhero is great, but you know what's even better? Is a city where everyone's a superhero. Is a city where you don't even need a superhero because the people are cops and the people are bureaucrats and the people are sort of their own. It's the sort of thing that is hard to politically, for me to take a political stance on it because the technology of the Blue Beetle doesn't exist. Similarly, Oliver Queen has no political opinions for the majority of his life other than cocaine is good and Ukrainian hookers are good. They should be available to me are his politics. I should have whatever I want at any time. And then after the crash in Star Island, when he's forced to take care of the other survivors, because that's a big change to my Oliver Queen, is the fact that there's other people on the island with him who he has to take care of, he switches to a total socialism, abolish money mindset, and essentially gives up a lot of his money and agency in Queen Pharmaceutical. His role as the Green Arrow is really a retaliation to Sivana. So again, Oliver Queen is put into a position to be a commentary on these things, but I'm so focused on their personal stories that by the time the world catches up to superheroes, really an endangered species, we get glimpses of how it's affected the political landscape, but it didn't feel right for me to comment on it. And, politically, I'm like a California Democrat. I'm very easy to pin down politically. I wasn't interested in having specific social justice messaging in it. And I could talk for a long time about this, but let's move on to the next question. So the politics of the epic. Yes, it was tempting to lean further in, but ultimately the character stories were more important. And ultimately politics are how we try to use our character to influence society and how we participate in society to more shape our vision of it. And if you're Superman, you can fly the White House and kill the president now. So you really could just take control of the world. So once you start engaging with the powers of politics in it, it gets a little hard. What angle did you have in mind for Martian Manhunter? Originally, I was going to have John Johns as an alien infiltrator who was sent here from the dead Martian society in caveman times to take over, but was damaged Iron Giant style on his way in. And so he has just been living lives as an infiltrator, waiting for the cue to take over the world for millennia. And he was another character who hit up on the ideas of fate and destiny, prescribed destiny versus the choices we make. I read all the Game of Thrones books to get in to the epic further. That's literally how I got into those books, to find more story structure stuff. And Manhunter was meant to be another character who is sort of trapped by their own fate, but ultimately Clark gets him to join the team, even though it's implied that he's still waiting for a dead culture to command him to end the world, and then he will. I just didn't find him necessary, and he was one extra person at the end versus Darkseid who didn't really fit, and so I nixed him. Agamotto 5354 asks the previous question, and how'd you come up with the Aquaman and Lovecraft angle? I don't know. Instantaneously. I knew that I wanted Aquaman to be Neville Longbottom, in that, or even like a Stannis Baratheon, a character who people think is going to be the chosen one, who fits certain parameters for being the chosen one. And I really wanted him to be raised by people who were the absolute opposite of the Kents. And I was like, okay, broken family unit. They have to raise him to believe he's better than everyone and that human life doesn't matter. He's associated with the ocean. Okay. Well, if he has powers, he's going to have to be from Brainiac. Well, what does the Fortress of Solitude look like on the bottom of the ocean? Oh, it's a Lovecraft cult. It's Innsmouth. And I felt excited. And the moment I felt excited, anytime something excited me in the epic, I just put it in and I built from there. Wolfman Jack asked, can you share more about your takes on Hugo Strange and Joe Chill? Hugo Strange is an overqualified but corrupt psychologist used to manipulate Bruce Wayne. Joe Chill is a methamphetamine addict who, when he was like 19, shot and killed the Waynes while high. He actually only kind of remembers doing it. He pled guilty and he went to jail. But the fact that he pled guilty and spent a good chunk of his life in jail, the majority of his life in jail, didn't affect Bruce's psychological break. And then ultimately, the Second Chance Diner. Bruce ultimately, upon healing, the last time we see Bruce before he vanishes until the end of Starlight Emperor is with Clark gifting Joe Chill a diner and a second chance. And he's meant to represent, I hate punitive justice, just because it's been proven to kind of not work in anything but a functional way. So the idea of Batman ultimately forgiving Chill and healing being Batman was the purpose of Joe, was the purpose of that character. How does Brainiac's base mind system work across Krypton, Darkseid, Vandal, and Starlight Emperor's swaps? So Brainiac's base mind system on Krypton is Brainiac 13. Is insane. So it's willing to hot swap immediately and fuck over Darkseid once it sees that Clark is there. But the Brainiac on Earth is a baby Brainiac who needed an imprint base mind. Keep in mind, the Brainiac 13 base mind is actually based on the Kryptonian who created it. The base mind system of Krypton is more about who's able to access the control interface for the planet. The base mind system on Earth is much simpler and also damaged and has an attachment disorder and tells the story of Krypton, tries to tell the story of Krypton to anyone who'll listen to it, because it's trying to understand, where Clark went, what it's doing. It came down separately. It got damaged by the firebombs Zod threw on Krypton. So the systems are deliberately a little confusing, but that's because they function much less like AI systems and more like characters. A flawed idiot genius on Earth and an evil, devious, capricious genius on Krypton. Will Clark keep the scars from fighting Barbara? Clark has the scars from fighting Barbara throughout the first half of Starlight Emperor, but upon dying and being resurrected, he is supercharged and all previous scars heal. So Clark actually loses those scars in that moment. Wolfman Jack asks, did the Green Lantern's 500-year quarantine explain the lack of alien contact? If so, how did Lobo and Hawkman reach Earth? Interesting, right? Hawkman. Is Hawkman in the Kryptonian Epic? The Thanagarians are mentioned. Lobo reached Earth for a very specific reason that is explained eventually and is a spoiler. But Lobo was able to get through the Green Lantern quarantine via a spoiler. Cattykins, 9660. What other Kryptonian tech explanations for Earth events were cut? E.g. the Lazarus Pit. None. Everything I wanted from Krypton to play out on Earth plays out in the Kryptonian Epic. The only things that were cut were generally things not involving the legacy of Krypton on Earth, and that's why I cut them. When did you fall in love with your Barry Allen? And was his narcissism a starting premise or an evolved choice? Mr. Red X asks that. Red X 55. Barry Allen. Oh my God. Barry Allen. Don't bother me. Barry, I fell in love with very quickly. I came up with his entire plot arc pretty much all at once and actually used his narrative structure as a deuter antagonist to backbone the whole later chapters of the epic. I love him because he sucks. I love him because you very rarely see a character who is legitimately unpleasant, but an undeniable, honorable, smart, brave, clever, heroic, cool genius. He's a badass too. Barry's like a maverick fighter pilot as the Flash, and he's a lot of different things you don't normally see combined. And I just love him as a mirror to Clark and a mirror to Z, who are sort of there are a bunch of deuter antagonists in the epic, but really it's Clark, Zatanna, and Barry. And each of them, Barry and Zatanna, they function strictly as mirrors to Clark. They were built to be mirrors to Clark's journey in the epic. So Zatanna's constant trauma and Barry's malignant narcissism and anger at his mother and anger at the scientific institutions as a whole, mixed with his genius and the fact that he is right. I mean, Barry Allen's probably one of the most important humans ever to live, if not the most important human ever to live. He's the guy, Lex Luthor, that scene in Starlight where Barry says, we make things, you steal them. We create things, you destroy them. He's meant to be, what if Lex Luthor was a good guy? Without adjusting that much about Lex Luthor. And so his narcissism was 100% a starting premise, and it was about building that guy into a team to a degree that you fucking root for him and you want him to win. And so ultimately, when he's able to really essentially beat any one of the Justice League, could have beaten Darkseid on their own in that final fight. But that beginning when he jumps in and we get a window into his thoughts, he's not literally saying all that, but it's sort of a window into his thoughts. It's very rare that anything like that happens in the epic, and it's for Barry. And it's to show that at the end of this guy's rainbow, at the end of all the narcissism and selfishness and ego, is someone who more than anything just wants to do the right thing and wants to be right and is just scared of failure. And once he has the Justice League at his back, he's not scared anymore. And that's why he makes that nobody fucks with the Justice League. That was, I made that Flashpoint Barry Allen's Finest Moment video years before I made a year, I think, before I made the Barry Allen. Probably my favorite thing in the epic is the deposition of Barry Allen. Sorry, long answer. 616 Entertainment asks, was Z's disassembly of Lex inspired by Chronica's MK11 fatality? Even the hand motions. No, I don't know what that is, and that's an example of parallel thinking. Z tearing apart Lex and then putting him back together was because I've very rarely seen the Anakin Skywalker type character, the Elphaba in Wicked. They very rarely get to do the thing where they just kill the person who was hurting them for years and years and years. But it's meant to show that revenge is fucked because she kills him and takes him apart, the most gruesome death for Lex, but then just brings him back to life, which means that Zatanna could have brought people back to life successfully this whole time. I mean, like so many different things emotionally. There's so much. If you watch the Z, the Magical Girl thing, and the movie I made, and you watch all the Epic, that final sequence from when Z appears with the music in Starlight Emperor, so many different things happen there as the crescendo of her story. And she's not really in Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. But the final Z appearance is with everyone's final appearance in Green Lantern Outbound Flight. And we get more into, but I'm over answering the question. Vermilion Miles asks, what was Jor-El's final message to Clark? I don't know. Part of the tragedy of Jor-El's final message to Clark is that we don't see, Clark watches that, but the Brainiac, thinking he's Kryptonian, does not translate it for him. So he is just witnesses the last words from his father, which is this alien slug thing that he only kind of understands to be his father. Not really. He sort of thinks it's an alien hologram of maybe something that's responsible for him. But he and Lois, in their snow gear, just stand there watching it. And that whole sequence leading in Do It Yourself, the end of Do It Yourself, where Zod comes out of the Phantom Zone, is meant to be deeply tragic because it's everything Clark was scared of being narrativized by Zod and going, everything you're afraid of about your life is true. You're actually bad. Your role isn't as a human, it's as an alien. And Clark almost loses the first time until his friends come to save him. How did Manchester Black gain psychic powers via ace chemicals? Unlike others, he does not have psychic powers. He has what appears to be telekinesis, but what is actually manipulation of electromagnetic fields caused by the plant splicing with human DNA by Kirk Langstrom and Pamela Isley based off the work of Gerard Schrugel. So even though it seems like he's a psychic who can throw psychic shockwaves, really what that telekinesis is very similar to what we see Clark use in the battle with Doomsday when he catches everyone around him. How'd you decide on Lex Luthor's ending in Starlight Emperor? Mika asked that, and it was very easy. I didn't want to kill him. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of being right about Clark in any respect. I didn't want Clark to give him the satisfaction of a big, cool villain death. And I realized this guy's whole life is a polemic. We should leave him smaller and smaller, the polemic shrinking into anger and darkness the same way old men who've spent their life in hatred end up alone in hatred. I just liked the idea of Lex alone in hatred. Mimi Bro, was the Bruce Goes Crazy Chasing Vandal idea early scrap or deliberate mislead? Early scrap. Wolfman asks, why spotlight Hardcastle and Waller in the background, and how do they diverge from canon? They are both good guys-ish. Waller is a much weirder character, and if the Kryptonian Epic was a TV show, she'd be in it a lot more. She's like Asperger's, rude, uptight weirdo who was in charge of the low-level secrecy stuff, except for then gradually as the kind of twin conspiracies of Wayne and Luthor and Queen and everybody who got involved in these billionaire Maxwell Lord, she gradually ended up sort of, especially after the Ace Chemicals incident, when there was a mass casualty incident based on all this stuff, she ended up in charge of all of it. So she actually is kind of a gray good guy, as is Armand Hardcastle. And Armand's from the Superman animated series. And I just love the idea of a military guy who actually gets to see what Clark Kent does. And that the United States military and the government finds out Superman is Clark Kent in a positive way rather than a negative way via the things he does at Ace Chemicals, his heroism at Ace Chemicals. Leprosy Snail asks, besides Victor and Kirk, who is the third person Barry loved to talk to? His wife, Iris. Robert Thomas asks, is Plastic Man in the Epic? No. Robert also asks, why is Dr. Fate a fanboy, and does he have a Mxyzptlk connection? Interesting question. Robert asks, is Black Adam in the Epic, since Shazam is? Shazam is not in the Epic. Billy Batson's in the Epic. It's different. So Black Adam is not in the Epic. Robert Thomas says, does white suit Bruce Wayne include bell bottoms? No. Cinechap asks, how do you protect your voice for all-day filming? Any tips? I'm chugging Theraflu. I have lozenges all the time. Ben and Trinity and Nicole and everybody on set is like gassing me up. Carvis is gassing me up. I'm quiet between takes, even though I have to direct. It's hard, especially because I do so many voices for the Epic. And even a voice like Clark's, which is, this is like my speaking voice. And then this is like Clark's speaking voice. It is slightly different. And he has a kind of earnestness to everything he says, and it's softer than my voice. But of course, he, like all the characters, he has my lisp. You know, Arthur's in here. Sometimes Arthur's down low here. And they're very like cartoony, silly voices. But it is interesting how different they all are. And I as time passed, jumping between them was a challenge. So it's interesting that you asked that. Leprosy asks, after fleeing Europe investigation, how is Barry living free post-FBI disposition? Barry is actually not living free. He is still being watched. However, his deals with the FBI and the CIA and Homeland Security and the DEA, all those paid off because Luthor gave him back the fucking, all of the LexCorp patents on the Flash technology dissolved once Luthor was in jail. So the answer is he really quickly became like one of the most, if not the most important scientist alive. And the sort of public desire, like if there was a guy right now who had committed a bunch of financial fraud, but he could clear global warming tomorrow, there would be giant public outcry for that guy and internal outcry for that guy to have as much agency as possible. Kendall asks, after fighting the super hybrid, Clark had full powers immediately. Shouldn't he have to recharge? No, the machine that reconstituted him supercharged him and actually rebuilt him from genetic information in his electromagnetic field. Interesting. We saw Clark expand that electromagnetic field and use it in new ways in his final fight with Doomsday. I wonder if that'll go somewhere, and I wonder if that has any grounding in traditional Superman mythology. I wonder. Do we ever learn about, Dishonest Honest asks, do we ever learn about the Thanagarian Lobo mentioned? Yes. A Halo player asks, what were the other Green Lanterns doing during the finale? You'll find out. Halo player 9855 says, why call Krypton War World rather than Apocalypse? Do the new gods exist here? They absolutely do not, but I like the name War World a lot better, if I'm honest. I've always thought Apocalypse, like Darkseid, is a bit tortured in terms of how it sounds. Halo player 985, could Morrison's Darkseid is the same guy concept fit into your universe? No, it could not. My Darkseid is a very specific character. Jack asks, why does Morrison's omnipotent Superman work for you while your Clark is more limited? Because he's a different type of Superman storytelling that I think is more allegorical and less literal. And I think the mastery of the All-Star Superman writing and the sort of almost grotesque art is the fact that it does read in this bubblegum comic book style that feels at the same time like so fucking classic and vintage comic storytelling, but also this very edgy, futuristic, self-aware without being meta, smirking, but warmly wonderful next-gen storytelling. Like, I really think All-Star Superman is like wonderful. And it's just a different type of storytelling. Fede asks, is there an official watch order but for the Epic beyond the playlist order? Oh, God. I'm never going to put it all in order. I don't know how. I didn't do it in order because I'm crazy. I did it in a way that was fun for me. And sorry, that's the thing people ask me the most. I've been thinking of combining every Epic video into one video, loosely in order, that you can watch through, which will be weird because you'll go from webcam video to high production video to webcam video. You'll have me with two different girlfriends and all different haircuts. You'll have me with shirts that are too tight and with a big beard. And the Kryptonian Epic is such a journey you take with me that revisiting it is often hard. It's so personal that it's like hard for me. That's why there hasn't been an order video. Fede also asks, where can we find the other pieces not on the channel? I don't know, the community tab.
Does the diner scene with Bruce and Clark stay? Yes, it does. It is an epilogue scene, one of 4 at the end of For All Mankind.
A number of people asked, did I pre-plan my death list or did I find them as I pitched? I knew everyone who was going to die from the beginning. I knew how they were going to die from the beginning. Some of the mechanisms changed, but after Agent of Batman was done, I knew what I was doing with almost everyone. Ultimately, there are some in the Agent of Batman Q&A, there are some plans that changed, but there's also things I say that actually turned out to be true on a long enough timeline. So it's interesting. I knew the fates of every character I would introduce. Like I knew immediately that Gerard would escape every situation I put him in and ultimately be killed by Vandal. And I knew Vandal was going in the Phantom Zone. I knew Ollie was going to be super unfairly killed by Zod. And I knew Ted was going to be killed by Zod because Zod represents all of the things that cause noble and good people like Ollie and Ted to fail. Zod is horrible. And I knew Zod was going to be killed by Luthor because the type of man Luthor is the kind of man who usually replaces a Zod in dynasties, tyrannical dynasties. It's interesting. Harley and Joker, I always knew that Lois was going to kill Joker, but then essentially murder Harley, was going to sort of punish her Harley while she dangled off a building. And that was always planned. Almost all of them were planned from the beginning. Fede asked, did Jimmy being Metallo have side effects? No, it did not. Slash Bum asks, was the animal's nature motif in Endangered Species just style or thematically tied to Krypton? It was both. The nature motif reoccurs again and again throughout the Kryptonian Epic because of all of the genetic splicing that happens. And the real majority of the superpowered characters in the Epic come back to the same power set expressed in different ways. And the physical mutations made possible by Green 71 or Kryptonite, that also ties back into the idea that, the big unanswerable question at the heart of Superman that no one's interested in asking is, why do Kryptonians look like humans? And I took that question and I said, they don't. And yet Clark still just looks like a person. And I wanted that to be a lingering question because, of course, that ultimately plays into everything important in the epic, the themes of identity with your species or your community or your friends or the people you love, how they view you, how the public views you. We're all animals in these situations. And Waylon and Kirk, Barbara, even people like Parasite, these transformations, Shugel, these transformations are simultaneously true to their DC lore while still being, superficially, while still being true for my goals for the characters, to represent different elements of this blurred identity. What happened to the, Pooltastic asks, what happened to the Blue Beetle saga deep dive? I've thought about it a lot, but it just seems like a lot of work that I've already done for a video that not a lot of people would watch. And I really love the Blue Beetle saga. I think it's some of my best writing in the epic, and I'm very proud of it. But the people who want to engage with it can engage with it through how it shows up in the videos and how it plays out in the written stuff I've done about Blue Beetle on my Medium, where I summarize the whole fucking thing from start to finish with spoilers that Ted died. I did that near the beginning. But the final chapter of the Blue Beetle saga is with Renee, and it happens in whatever happened to... Spoilers! This is for people who watch this far in the video. Renee Montoya is one of the protagonists, one of the main characters of whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow, or the Last Son of Krypton. Pardon me. Sorry, Alan. Wherever you are, sorry. Pooltastic. Why did Lois kill Joker instead of Jimmy? Because Jimmy already had his... Are you going to be the person who kills someone moment. Good pickup on the fact that Joker and Jimmy are very intertwined. They're both bohemian, young African-American men who are flamboyant and smart and obsessed with media and presentation. Joker does feel that he has successfully manipulated Jimmy to make him more famous, which he has, in the same way that Lex manipulated Jimmy to make him more famous. Jimmy has spent a crazy amount of time
looking at his own identity as an adopted kid who fought his way out of poverty as a skate photographer. He has spent a whole bunch of time looking at his identity. And as a gay man, he's really a mirror of Aaron's. Aaron is from privilege. Aaron is an art school student who chooses to be the Joker. Jimmy becomes Jimmy through hard work. Aaron becomes the Joker because, number one, he's evil, and number two, he secretly eventually has Lex funding him as his patron. So Jimmy killing the Joker would be so separate from their stories that I needed Jimmy's real final character beat happens in Endangered Species. He's in Starlight and Outbound Flight, but really Jimmy's final character beat is choosing not to kill Clark as Metallo, choosing not to be the person who kills someone. Whereas Lois spends the entire epic, her role in the entire epic, she's always one step ahead and one step behind. She's mentally one step ahead, but the actions of other characters put her one step behind. And you can see that I often say she becomes half, after Agent of Batman, she becomes half of Superman. Clark is kind of only half of it. You know, it's her idea to start the society. It's kind of Pete's, but it's really Lois's. So ultimately, her being leveraged into a situation where finally it's a put up and shut up, an irredeemable psychopath is attempting to sow terror and chaos throughout the world by changing a narrative. Well, what's Lois's big thing been? Helping the world have a clear narrative. And she feels like she betrayed that by hiding that Clark was Superman. And she feels like she betrayed herself. And in a lot of ways, karmically, philosophically, even though it's something I don't approve of, which is a murder, Lois does save the day in that moment. And I wanted a Lois save the day moment that felt brutal and cruel. And I wanted a death for Joker that felt brutal and cruel. And I went, oh, there's kind of a secret storyline of both of these people trying to determine how the public views superheroes. They both do that in the wake of Ace Chemicals. They both do that in the wake of the Parasite Rampage. They both do that. They do that every chance they get. So, and they do that on TV, ultimately against each other. So I wanted her to end the Joker's narrative, and that's why. Multiple people ask if the Kryptonian Epic is a lifelong work, and what does it mean to me? It's not. It's not a lifelong work. It's something I constructed as an adult man. It's something I constructed in my 30s, and I had ghosts of it in the first half of my 30s, but really in the back half of my 30s. And it contains every trick I've learned about storytelling, every mechanic that I've tried to perfect, every structural thing I wanted to experiment with. It contains me being on camera, something that I know you'll never believe this, but it doesn't come naturally to me, and it makes me nervous, and performing or acting makes me nervous. It's an extremely personal thing, but it's not a lifelong thing. And it was to do my craft. You know, I love this. Darth Madeira, R1G, asks, why choose Riddler to help Clark start the society? How did you pick the integral characters? I looked at people who haven't been maximalized, who haven't been leaned on, who have been venerated in the sense that they have all these sort of, the Riddler's the smartest guy alive, and in Hush, he figured out who Batman is. Right, and then he went back to being the Riddler, and he's the Riddler. And I thought, well, wait a minute. If I have a closed timeline where I'm telling this like a story with a beginning, middle, and end, I don't need to keep any of these people in their sort of perfunctory loop as their superpowered character. I can remove everyone from their loop. Well, what happens after Riddler's done getting his ass kicked by Batman? Well, what if he met Superman? Wait a minute. What Riddler really wants is for people to acknowledge his brilliance. Maybe that's what he really wants. You know, as a fictional character, you have to kind of look at their want abstractly because you're putting your own structure into each character. And Eddie just, once that link turned of this is a mentally ill guy who has been wanting someone to listen to him. And when someone finally listens to him, it cracks his mental illness because the person who listens to him is Superman. Moments like that for a person who deals with mental illness or psychosis, moments of giant break, floodgate moments, aha moments do happen. They're just so few and far between. And they require and usually the person will fall back into the patterns like Eddie ultimately does. Eddie ultimately sacrifices himself because he isn't able to get past the problems that turned him into the Riddler. Unlike Bruce Wayne, who does get past the problems that turned him into Batman. Maybe Eddie should have done psychedelics. That's the Eddie. I love him. I love Edward Nygma. Stephen Chesser asks, with so many versions and threads, how did you keep continuity? What was scripted, sketched, or just in your head? The whole thing was just in my head. And then when it came time to shoot them, I would write out everything I remembered. These are technical questions. Will the Kryptonian Epic soundtrack be released? It's already available. Search for Alberto Barsato. He has uploaded a lot of the music from the Kryptonian Epic. Nolan Lortz asks, how far beyond the end have you thought? Any ideas for continuing characters and stories? No. The Kryptonian Epic ends with Green Lantern Outbound Flight. I'm proud of, I always say, I love my own work. It always sounds, I feel a little indulgent when I say that, but I'm very proud of the final images of the epic. Because really, Outbound Flight exists to explain some things and also end Z and Barry as satisfying of a way as I ended Clark. And Diana and Pete, of course. And we do such fun stuff with the boys, and I don't want spoilers. A couple people actually have asked, why didn't Clark just fix Lex with a hug? Because Lex hates Clark at multiple levels. Lex is unable to engage with who Clark is in the way that Eddie and a number of other villainous characters ultimately engage with him. Clark presents himself primarily to people when he confronts them as neutral or helpless. He does that even to the Suicide Squad before he kills them. He literally gives them the chance to just not kill him. His power is sort of the fact that his powers give him the chance to give people second chances. But every second chance he gives Lex tries him even further. And if you've read American Alien issue 5, you know that the first time they talked, Lex decided that Clark was not worthy, and that was his decision. And there was nothing Clark could have done to change Lex. It's frustrating. There are characters who could have gotten through to Lex, but they had their own problems and they didn't. There's a version where Lex, he's always going to be an evil, impulsive, capricious murderer with aspirations of global domination, but there are versions of Lex that could have been kinder had certain people made other choices, but they didn't. Kotonte asks, why pick characters and some and not others? i.e. Hamilton versus Barry at Ace. Why elevate Nygma and other smart DC characters? Same answer. I was looking for potential and ways people could specifically mirror Clark. Riddler is a super smart guy with no powers at all who's a villain who relies on you solving puzzles. My Clark is not a guy who can solve puzzles in that way. So I go, Hamilton, who cares about Hamilton and Star Labs and all that? I get that they are important in the Superman mythos, but they have never truly been used in a way that made them seem significant or important. And ultimately, it was more interesting to me to use the Batman villains at Ace as a Star Labs counterpart than it was to do Star itself, because then I would have had to deal with a lot of other characters who I wasn't interested in playing with. Yoon Cran 1227 asks, any chance of a remaster including Bruce putting the Batman mask on Vandal? Bruce does put the Batman mask on Vandal in Starlight and pummels him, but I didn't include it when I was narrating Starlight because I'm an idiot, but that's something that happens. It won't be mentioned in the remaster, but a remaster is coming. What happens to Brainiac's Earth copy now that Clark is the base mind? You will find out in Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. Gray7601 asks, can you release a single pack of the character design images? I'll ask David North. He also asks, is the Phantom Zone still accessible from Antarctica? Is Vandal still a threat? Yes, the Phantom Zone will play into future stories. No, Vandal Savage does not reappear. He fell. He's gone forever, falling. Mookie Entertainment asks, why don't more superhero movies use disaster film structure like Starlight Emperor? Well, Starlight Emperor is structure. If you're talking structure, if we're talking writing and Starlight Emperor, take a look at the structure. It is 7 climactic confrontations in a row. And I really think we did it well with the pacing because it doesn't feel like that. But we go from, it's everything the epic has been avoiding up until this point. It's fight, 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 wedding. It's really crazy. And the reason superhero movies don't use that structure usually is because to pull off that structure the way I did it, you have to know and like everyone. You have to keep in mind a number of characters are finishing arcs that I've set up for years during Starlight Emperor. And so Starlight Emperor is built to accommodate Diana questioning and then finally settling into the role of being a superhero, and Barry Allen doing much the same in a different way and finally embracing it. And Pete Ross finally taking his role at Clark's side and becoming truly one of the gang. And Zatanna ultimately failing the morality test, but it not mattering because she's a magic god. And at the end of the day, Clark is able to talk her out of her worst impulses and becoming the villain that it's always sort of been fated that she will be. And Arthur has to simultaneously give up on all of the prophetic thinking that he has crippled him and made him an exile from society. And we saw at the beginning of Endangered Species, he's enjoying helping people and kind of being a hero. But now it's the end of the world. So Arthur is being tested and his prophetic thinking is being tested. And then, of course, he fulfills it. He beats Darkseid. And even then he rejects the prophecy. So, and then Lois is taking control of the narrative of the world, and Rudy Jones is coming through when it really matters, and Dick Grayson and Bruce Wayne are finally reconnecting. So I'm like in a sprint through the finales. Superman dies. If this is a movie, Superman's dead by minute 30. So like, and back by minute 50. So like, it really is nuts. And I think more people don't use that structure because it's really hard. Jaden says, will you do a Legion of Superheroes sequel? No. They also say, which ideas didn't fit in the epic? Supergirl, but I found a way. Did you plan to include Mr. Mxyzptlk in the epic? He is in the epic more than once. Mr. Mxyzptlk is a very specific tool in the epic. What were major inspirations for the epic and its characters? Oh, gosh. DC Comics, Game of Thrones, Terry Pratchett, Stephen King, Grant Morrison, The Watchmen, Alan Moore's Watchmen, but what isn't? That's like saying my slasher movie was influenced by Halloween. There are so many. Powers, the comic, the Brian Michael Bendis comic, but then also the bigger mythic stuff and prophecy stuff, and everything needing to answer itself. There's a little bit of the Odyssey. I hate to be that guy, but there is. A little bit of Mark Twain in there with the way characters' sort of ironic fates play out into each other. There's just so much that went into the epic, and I think it really shows because a lot of the characters kind of have their own. The Wire was very influential, as was the Shield on fucking Blue Beetle's storyline. There's so many. Japanese horror and feminist horror, that sort of wave of the 2010s, and art house horror fit in a lot to Zatanna's storyline. It just goes on and on and on, really. Thoughts on comparisons to Ultimate Marvel? It is like Ultimate Marvel. Very much so. If Kara Supergirl appeared, what would she be like? She does, and I'm not going to tell you. Comichead8431 asks, was the Theater in the Round Lex Clark showdown filmed in one day? Did any locations need multiple days? It was filmed in one day, and Rocio came out, Nicole came out. We all worked extra fucking hard. Andrew and Tyler and Ben shooting it, Josh on sound. And we were in the Theater in the Round. We were there for 6.5 hours, and I was in and out of different makeups. And I think that sequence Clark versus Lex, or Zatanna Clark Lex into Clark versus Lex. Other than Deposition, I think that's maybe my best acting, if you can call what I do acting, and directing in the Epic. And I'm proud of it. And it was really hard. And yeah, most of our locations, because I didn't want to spend a lot of money on the Epic, because I can't make money on it, most of our locations were one and done. But the house in Starlight, the screen theater in Agent or in Death and Death of Batman, and Endangered and Starlight, we did multiple days, but most of them one and done. Would I ever crowdfund an original comic or graphic novel? I think I'd feel shitty doing that, as long as I'm still, I'm doing okay financially, so I don't want to ask for money from anyone that I don't need, that isn't my time. Brock Carr asks, who's your personal favorite character in the Epic and why? Clark Kent, sorry. I'm proud of my version of Clark. I'm proud of the things he does. I'm proud that he's likable and he's smart, and I like him as a hero. I'm a Jon Snow guy, I like that he really does it and that he stays true to himself. And I like that he kills the Suicide Squad and Floyd, and I like that he makes mistakes, and I don't know, I find him compelling. And then, of course, my second favorite characters are right out in front of you, are the Deuter antagonists, are Z and Barry. And then there are lots of people I really like Floyd and Victor and Lois. But really, Clark. I'm corny. Katslino asks, how similar to Z's powers are Todd and Amanda in Dirk Gently? And is that a Max Landis constant? Could Z hear the snail? Z would not be able to hear the snail. The powers in Dirk Gently are related to a specific, really weird magic system that I made up based on Douglas Adams' books. So Todd and Amanda's powers are perceptual, primarily in Dirk Gently. Amanda's powers become magical only when she goes to the other world, because in that other world, that world's already a world created via those magic rules. So Wakti Wapnasi, and this is all Dirk Gently Season 2 stuff. Dirk Gently Season 2, I went too far, and I wish I had done the alien abduction season first, the trying to find the woman's car keys, but I'm pretty proud of it. And if you haven't watched my show, Dirk Gently, and you like the Epic, come on. It's on Hulu. Go watch, or Netflix, or whatever it's on. Go watch my TV show. And watch Channel Zero. And watch what's it called? Shadow in the Cloud. And you know what? Watch Jane L.A. on my YouTube video. And go back and watch all the videos of the Kryptonian Epic. And follow me on Instagram, @UpToMyKnees. Matthew B. Demented asks, how do you balance staying true to iconic characters with your artistic freedom to change them? I do feel like most of my characters, even ones that are pretty fucking different, they serve a similar narrative role to their mainstream characters. So my guidelines were really, how am I using this person to tell the epic story of the epic hero, Clark Kent, the last son of Krypton? How is Arthur Curry or Ted Kord's story, how does it fit into his? What does it really mean? Like Jason Todd, if I want to use that character, how do I use them in a way that better illuminates Batman and Bruce Wayne as foils for Clark Kent? Everything goes back to the thinking about Clark, how that character ultimately interacts with Clark, what they mean to a person who does interact with Clark. That's how I redid it. Purcell Worthman asks, how did you decide who gets a book, and what would a solo Diana story be like? Interestingly, I decided on who gets their own big chapter based on how much it ultimately affected Krypton's lore. Eddie and Ollie share the Queen Prince because they are ultimately going to be big foils for Clark. Arthur has At the Depths of Madness, but At the Depths of Madness also is all about his father Tom and the cult, and Stephen Shin, and is actually kind of like a dark thriller, and Arthur is kind of a secondary character until the last act of At the Depths, when he and his father are on the run. But Bruce has Death Wish because I wanted to hit, I felt the twist that Batman and Bruce Wayne are different personalities, the Fight Club twist, was big enough that it needed its own story. And there needed to be a really clear way to juxtapose Bruce's trauma about his past and fears about his past with having Clark and Bruce's juxtaposed to each other. So like, it's funny because you have to go like 3 steps removed to be like, okay, I need to have a deep look into Batman's psyche, so I guess he doesn't need his own. And Diana, what's interesting about Diana is that her story, she's not a dude antagonist. Diana's very much a secondary character in the Kryptonian Epic. There are lots of wonderful women in the epic who are more important than Diana. Lois and Z and Renee Montoya. Renee and Diana ultimately kind of fulfill different but similar roles. But Diana ultimately what I wanted, because she is, I guess a Diana book would be about the Justice League and the adventures of her when she was being controlled by Luthor. Because Diana's story is about shaking belief and shaking belief systems that have put doubt and pain and fear into you and have allowed you to be manipulated. Her whole thing is about shaking that monkey off your back and finding the true power within. So that's ultimately what she represents to Clark, is the ability to shape your own destiny, which is what Wonder Woman ultimately does. Remember, she fights the whole society and wins. So she ultimately is the one who makes her own choices. And that's inspiring to Clark, and what ultimately leads him to recruit her at the end of For All Mankind with Aquaman into the Justice League, or into the Justice Society. At that point, it's a super, who even knows what it is by the time that it's an endangered species. It's the society, but at that point, they're more just a friend group who is wanted by the FBI, even though they're being allowed to exist publicly. So I don't know what Diana's book would be. It would be a flashback to living under Luthor, I think. Car Crash Jason asks, what are the most significant changes you made over the last 5 years, and why? The biggest and most significant change was Doomsday, and figuring out the super hybrid, and figuring out exactly what happened on Krypton and how it played into what happens on Earth. Because ultimately it's a dance of 2 planets and the fates of 2 worlds and the fates of 2 species, and how individuals' choices play out on Krypton is meant to be mirrored by the choices we ultimately see on Earth, except for things play out a different way due to the protagonist, the epic hero of the epic, the Azor Ahai of the epic, Clark Kent. The biggest change is we're building Doomsday's lore. And that's also the one part of the epic that's non-canon, is the Doomsday story in American Alien. James Shepherds asks, why not explain Z's powers? What was the meta reason? James, you have missed a trick. You have answered your own question within your question. Why not explain Z's powers? What was the meta reason? That's the answer. James also asks, how does Clark's EM field manifest super senses? It barely does. My version of Clark needs to really focus in order to have super senses, but the way that works is through electromagnetic sonar being turned into electrical feedback. So almost everything in our body is our nervous system, which is an electrical system. Clark's powers, my version of Clark, when he really focuses in on something, does essentially a sonar ping with the electrical field around him, with the electromagnetic field, the unique field, and it pings back to him and sends that information through the field into his brain. So instead of coming through his ear, his super hearing is going directly into like his eardrum, into his cochlea, because he doesn't need to hear it. Same with his supervision. He's not actually seeing things. It's going directly into the back of his eye because the information is being skipped. When Clark uses farsight and looks super far away, it's almost like he's remembering what he's seeing or getting it streamed to him in real time. It's one of the main reasons you repeatedly see my version of Clark Kent be surprised or ambushed, is because unless Clark is focusing, he does not have super senses. My version of Ollie versus the 87 Predator. Who wins? 87 Predator is fucked. Ollie's taking his head. Would Lois Lane beat young Noam Chomsky in a debate? Probably not. Lois, when she was younger, modern Lois Lane might. But when she was younger, you can see in American Alien that her ego drives her really hard. James Shepard James Shepard also asks, how long did it take to gain professional writer confidence? Here's my greatest advantage as a writer. Ever since I was little, I was shown two worlds. I was shown the world of John Landis, where being a writer or a filmmaker was a real thing. My dad does it. People my dad knows do it. It's not that weird. You know, when you're raised in that bubble, it's hard to recognize the privilege of being close to artists at that level and at that level of success. But then the other part of it, if you know my journey, is I'm a person who's really had struggles with mental illness that made my childhood my whole young life, very a whirlwind of a lot of people in different ways telling me that I would never be successful and that my ideas weren't interesting or good. And I did not care. I downloaded Final Draft, and I knew I would never really be able to write movies, but I knew that being a writer was what I am and who I am, and I wanted to tell stories. And so with no hope really of ever being a screenwriter, by the time I was 18, I had already written so many scripts because I just wanted it so bad. And my confidence does not come from legitimate artistic confidence. It comes from my love of my own work and my belief in my own work. And one of the things that made me, I guess I'm a screenwriter again, finally, but one of the things that's been interesting is that even though I have this very big personality, and you used to see me on movie fights or on podcasts being very manic and big, even though I am that way, I'm pretty easy to work with, and I take notes well, professionally. And I like it. If you can't tell, I enjoy this process. It's been professionally, I don't know if I have confidence in the way that I present something and I think it's perfect. But personally, it's because it comes from inside me and it's what I believe in. So as long as you believe in what you're doing, confidence becomes easy. Jack Deviant asks, in DIY, what happened to Zod's Kryptonian seed capsule? Real, destroyed, or a lie? It was real. Zod had the Bottle City of Kandor, except for in my version, it was a whole bunch of those seeds. We could have made a whole bunch of superpowered humans, and Zod destroys it out of spite because Clark doesn't give him what he wants. Zod fucking sucks. If Brainiac 13 hadn't been sent into the sun, could it be redeemed or useful? No. Brainiac 13 was insane and would have originally reverted to some version of a genocidal crusade against something. Darkseid really, the thing Drax did was give it a direction, but it was still looking. Monkey Sweet asks, how do you track chronology, relationships, and dynamics without writing the whole epic on paper? I don't know. I don't know how I'm able to do that. It's all in my brain. And there have been a couple of stories that I built over time that became like that, where I know everything when you ask me, and I can't fully explain how I do it. And I wish I could teach it to people. Hansel Citron asks, what materials were Batman's AA number 4 suit made out of? Now, obviously, if you see him in AA number 4, he gets his cape ripped off and he's in an older school, more traditional version of the Batman costume. But if you're an Epic head, you know that Batman's costume actually ended up being made of ablative material, sort of from both Dan's designs and also the stolen Clark pod that he replaced with a replica at Kent Farm. And ultimately, Batman looks like this black shape that looks like Batman, but it's Vanta black and it absorbs all light and energy. So bullets, when they hit him, it doesn't even make a sound. They just fall. They just fall like the same way they do off Superman. But it's very frightening for criminals to fire a bunch of machine guns into a Batman and the bullets just don't appear to even be hitting him. And all you hear are tinkle, 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 tinkle. So that was made of normal Batman stuff. Kevlar, whatever the hell normal Batman shit is made out of. Did Dick have a pre-Kryptonian Robin suit? And how did he get the name Robin here? Dick did indeed have a pre-Kryptonian Robin armor. And he got the name Robin the same way he got it from fucking traditional, through Robin Hood. The idea that he would help and be a figure that is a rich figure who gives back to the poor. And that to him made more sense than him being something having to do with Batman. What materials did Martha use for Clark's classic suit, and why make a new one? Clark repeatedly reinvents himself because he realizes more and more and more that Superman needs to be a brand. That's what American Alien issue 6 is kind of about, and what so much of the epic is about, is the identity of Superman and the visual iconography of Superman slowly crushing the life of this guy Clark Kent as he sort of attempts to do the right thing for the world. So Martha basically made that out of like normal clothes, which is why there were multiple versions, because bullet holes got put in it, which is why he started wearing the BMX armor, because originally he wore a bulletproof vest, and that was because bullets still stung to get hit by for him, and also he didn't want people to know he was invincible. Of course, in American Alien issue 4, we see that Lois Lane has noticed the bullets bouncing off his arms. Or that's issue 5. Who would be your dream cinematographer? I don't know. There would be many different cinematographers for each different part of the epic. Why pick Sivana to infiltrate Queen Pharmaceutical? I wanted a villain who operated in the realm of the mind, who could be a major DC villain, who could be more creepy and manipulative and scumbaggy than outright evil. And Sivana's role in The Queen Prince is ultimately his greed creates the Riddler and fucking Green Arrow. So I like the idea of giving a major Wonder Woman villain a role there. Godfrey Hicker asks, was Connor Had Two Dads a nod to Connor Kent's two dads? It was not. During Earth's quarantine, was Clark's pod in decaying orbit, and were the Lanterns ordered not to interact? You will find out the answer to that in Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. Cattykins asks, if Z mirrors Clark as an Earthborn powerhouse, would Cyborg or Martian Manhunter have served similar roles? No. Z is representative of power. Just power. The abstract idea of power. And literally, she is a literal representation of the abstract. So they would have been more like plot science fiction based. Z is magical. Joseph Blodeleone asks, if the epic was released as comics as intended, would reception be clearer or more divisive? I think much clearer, but it would also take like 7 or 8 years. And I would need to be working all the time to write it all. It'd take 10 years. And all the art, all the different books, I would not want them released as issues. I would want the books released. And some of them I would want released close to each other. And that marketing model, even now, the comics industry is having so much trouble. I really think the epic is in the form it was meant to exist as. Nate the Great asks, whatever happened to Rudy Jones' actual significant other? You will see him. I did not mention him, but he is featured in Starlight Emperor. He's in the hotel room with Rudy. And you will see him in Whatever Happened to Last Son of Krypton. Jack Rain asks, why make Pete Ross the Green Lantern and last Justice League member instead of Hal or John? What do Hal and John mean to Clark? Really? I'm going to add another person for a wearable power? No, I've got someone. I've got someone right there. Pete was going to be Green Lantern from the point that you see him list all the other superheroes in American Alien issue 6. It was always my plan. Hal and Kyle and John were never a part of Guy. They were never a part of my plan. And the way Green Lanterns ultimately work and why they haven't been in the story is important. But I don't want to explore it with characters who I'm introducing for that purpose. I want to use Pete and Barry and Diana and Z. And I want to see the Green Lanterns from that angle. I don't want to have a character who is Green Lantern. Asked Castle asks, why did certain villains kill specific heroes? E.g. Zod versus the Super Hybrids victims. Okay, that was really thought out. Man-Bat, Kirk, is of course killed by the Super Hybrid while trying to save Wayland. Kirk caused the incident at Ace Chemicals. I mean, Victor and Kirk, teamwork makes the dream work, and really it was Lex and Shugel's issue for being evil. But Kirk is the one who ultimately shut down the security systems when everything was going insane and released Killer Croc and turned himself into Man-Bat. And he did all that in an effort to repair what he felt were the biggest mistakes of his life. And ultimately, he tried to turn that around, but in the end of Endangered Species. But really, even though Kirk is a wonderful person, he's not a fighter, and he can't fight a monster, and he would have cured every disease in the world. And it's so unfair that he's killed by just this brute animal. And that's exactly the same for Victor. Victor is killed by a brute animal. That is, both of them are killed by manifestations of the Kryptonian technology that corrupted them. They are both killed by a monster created by the technology that made them pioneers. So that was very, very deliberate. And then, of course, Zod killing Ollie and Ted. I already talked about this a little bit, but Ollie represents a person in power doing the right thing, an aristocrat, a plutocrat, whatever you want to call them, the 1%. It's, the Civil War is, people say World War II, but I think the Civil War is as close as you come to good versus evil. And the thing I like about the Civil War is that it's the richest, whitest people in America going, hey, to the other richest, whitest people in America, hey, if you don't free these people, we're going to fucking go to war. We'll blow up the whole country if you don't free these people. And the more you learn about the Civil War, people try to make it about states' rights. Yeah, states' rights to have slavery. You ever read the Lincoln letter? It's brilliant. It's Abe Lincoln trolling. And I love the idea that a powerful, important person can be lifted up morally by their experiences of poverty. I thought that was important. Nope, Zod killed him. Actually, the 1% are usually evil. Same for Ted. Wouldn't it be great if we could get a military guy or girls, a person who is about order and who really was earnest and good and noble and humble and did the right thing no matter what. And they really did it, and they're put in charge, and they create a beautiful dynasty that helps everyone. Well, here comes this prick. Sorry, it's done. Just like the cruelty of Zod being the one to kill Ollie and Ted was really important to me. And the irony of the hybrid being the one to kill Victor and Kirk for the compromises they'd made. Not that they deserved it. No one who dies deserved it. Except Zod. He's the only character he needed to die. But, and Shugel probably had it coming. Zaz maybe. Luther made some good calls with who he took out, but that's why. The deaths were very intentional. Milka Samuel says, how did Bruce meet Wally and Billy? What's their relationship and how exactly do their powers work? 2B and 2W are the only two fake Kryptonians created by Kirk Langstrom and Pamela Isley that worked. Wally's powers work on a genetic level in the same way with red physics that Barry's machinery does. And Billy's powers they're both just electromagnetic field manipulation and saturation on a genetic level. So Billy has all the same powers as Clark, but weaker. He's more powerful at a younger age, but weaker in general. But he can also do this thing where he can generate, like we saw, Shazam, he can generate from his electromagnetic field incredibly huge blasts of power. So both of them are introduced off screen to Bruce Wayne by Clark Kent, which is mentioned in Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, where we get to see them a little older. Or whatever, I keep calling it that. Whatever Happened to the Last Son of Krypton. I need to get that right, because otherwise I sound like I'm mentioning someone else's book. But they were introduced, and that's how they became Robins. Frankly, I'm a person says, who on Thanagar? Everybody's asking about Thanagar. You'll find out. Frankly, I'm a person says, was the Booster Gold nod just a wink or a setup for timeline shenanigans? It was a wink. Yoso Unapina says, why include so many disparate villains in Starlight Emperor, front-loading action with quieter finales? Because Starlight Emperor represents the end of an epic story, it represents me trying to do everything that Deathly Hallows and fucking Return of the King and Return of the Jedi and all of these various different big endings try to do, I'm trying to do the most perfect version of that I can. So that means answer in a plot way, in an emotional way, in a philosophical way, all equally important, all the big questions I've asked. So we need all villains on deck, all heroes on deck, and we clear them out with these confrontations and moments that are meant to be, and I hope this worked, quite unexpected, but satisfying. And everybody's meant to kind of get an ending, and that's why. Jesse 23 Bay says, was your Man-Bat performance inspired by Jimmy Stewart? Yes, it was. Kirk Langstrom has a certain Jimmy Stewartness when he's still human, but once he's Man-Bat, the Jimmy Stewartness is like in here. And I definitely saw him as portrayed by Jimmy Stewart, just because I think Jimmy Stewart is such a cool casting for Man-Bat. Love is a Battlefield 69 says, what inspired your hybrid format? Pitch meeting, mythic oral storytelling with B-movie gloss. Beautifully said. It was the OG. It was, Drunk Comic Book History, The Robins. It's my OG YouTube storytelling format. It's the way I've always done it. It's wrestling isn't wrestling. It's everything I do. I do this like minimal craft effort, but maximal thought effort storytelling. And if you engage with it, there's a high barrier to entry. But to engage with it, you already have to sort of sit into it and get caught up in it. And me trying to marshal the momentum of a story is one of the great challenges for me, and made it so much more fun to do it. It made it so I could do videos off the cuff, or I could sit into it and make a video a big project for me and my friends. So I could always find a new way to have fun is the real answer. I wish there was a more authorly answer. A couple people asked questions about John Constantine. Why is he an American from Los Angeles, and why the Vatican job? Because I thought it was cool. I thought him working at the Vatican set up this kind of classical conspiracy backdrop that I play with a lot, that now the sort of Fox Mulderness of it all is now intertwined with the Krypton lore. So you get the sort of mythic historical fanfic with various characters, and sort of I like the idea that Constantine is someone who weaves through that holistically and naturalistically. Car Crash Jason asks, why did Krypton reach Earth fast but take longer to reach the sun? If you recall, it's not on FTL engines. It's not in a boom tube going to the sun. It's just driving to the sun. So it's not traveling at light speed. It's gonna take years and years to reach the sun. There were questions, why does the Fortress contain a Phantom Zone portal? It comes in all of the Horizon Project bases. In the Horizon pods, there's an entry to the Phantom Zone, because before Zod started using it as an interdimensional prison experiment realm, it was actually kind of a practical thing for Kryptonians to use it. It's not like inherently a bad place. It's just a giant void. So in case you need it, you need it. Fedor Bulgakov asks, if the epic arcs were films, which directors would you choose? Too hard, buddy. Too hard. I would love Fincher for Endangered Species, James Cameron for All Mankind, or actually no. I don't know who'd do For All Mankind, because they have to do the whole second half of For All Mankind is the death of Batman, is the crazy drug trip. So I don't know. That's a good question. The Jester 930 asks, can the Q&As be consolidated in one place? And have you spoken with a pro DM in Glass Planet? Yes, several Dungeon Masters have come to me in Glass Planets, and it's been very satisfying. Pietro asks, any extra flavor on Jason Todd, Catwoman, and Barbara Gordon? Jason Todd, sadly, no. You get everything you're going to get of him in Death Wish. Catwoman, also sadly, no. She's out of the story. She leaves Bruce because she realizes he's crazy. And Barbara Gordon, yes, you will be seeing Barbara Gordon again. So Wolfman Jack says, you said Killer Moth was part of Bruce's psychosis. What did you mean? I don't know. Have you ever looked up Killer Moth? What did I mean? whatever happened to the last son of Krypton. Eyes for the Stars says, how exactly did the super hybrid get to Metropolis via Kryptonian tech? Well, if you will remember, there was a transporter, a door directly to outside the Fortress of Solitude in fucking Innsmouth, in Amnesty Bay, in the basement of the church that then collapsed. Well, that was got by the Starlight Emperor program. And when everything was moved for the inquest, all of the technology was moved into one place. All the recovered stuff the government had was in one place, and all of the weapons that were turned in were in one place. One's downtown, one's uptown. So this horrible thing happens where when Doomsday steps out of the Phantom Zone in the Fortress of Solitude, Lex just tries to use his faint knowledge through Kent Nelson of the Kryptonian technology, open a portal to somewhere on Earth. Where's the only portal on Earth? It's in the basement, being kept where they transported it. So Doomsday ends up going from there into, we don't see how it happens, but physically, at some point, Doomsday went, whoa, big door? Me go through big door, people to kill? And our villains, our heroes, hid from him, so out he went. Okay, a tired cliche. Who counts among the truly evil characters in the epic? Could characters like Crane, Harleen, Shugel, Isley be redeemed? Isley, yes. Isley's a murderer and a sexual obsessive and a psychopath, but she's brilliant and she's a deeply sad person. And what she needed ultimately was Arkham, but like good Arkham, which didn't really exist. When Luthor sprung her and put her into Ace, it was a death sentence. And she became obsessed with Kirk and was being weird to Barry and Victor, and just really then murdered Jack the Creeper, which kind of set everything into motion because she was so upset that he didn't respond to her advances. So Isley, I don't know, truly evil, but she's very fucked up. Shugel's a fucking piece of shit and a monster. I would say he's evil, and he's certainly more evil than a character like Luthor. Even though Luthor is really evil, Luthor at least has a goal. Shugel just wants to see what science can do and doesn't care about human beings. He's like the dark side of Kirk Langstrom. Crane is an anti-natalist. He believes that babies shouldn't be born and the human race should go extinct. So he really 100% believes that, and that his idea of psychological clarity is suicide. So, I mean, yeah, he's pretty bad too. And then Harleen is not actually named Harleen. She's named Arlene Adams. And Arlene Adams is a piece of shit and a murderer, a narcissist, and, is not even really Harley Quinn. Like Aaron Scott, she's a person choosing to act as a murderous supervillain. They are making a call to act that way. It's a sane person making a choice. So Lois shooting her in the face, ultimately, it's because Lois knows, the reason she shoots her is she knows there is no safe way to bring Harley back up into the Daily Planet. Like, the second you bring Harley up into the Daily Planet, she goes, surprise, I have a grenade, and I kill myself. And also the fact that Arlene was using the Harley Quinn voice when she was dangling, when she goes, girls gotta stick together. That's not her fucking voice. And Lois knows that. So could she be redeemed? They're pretty big pieces of shit. Vandal's misguided, but he's pretty fucking bad. Zaz, there's some mitigating societal factors, but he's a child murderer and has killed hundreds of people, so he's pretty fucking bad. Floyd Lawton is a really interesting case of evil in the epic because Floyd is so regularly given opportunities to do the thing so many antagonists in the epic do, where they're confronted in a new way and they go, oh, I see. This gives me new context for the error of my ways. Where every time Floyd does that, he doubles down further on Luthor's way being right. So piece of shit, piece of shit right there. Who else a big piece of shit? There are a lot of bad guys. Real evil characters, there's only like 4. Because I think of evil as something baseless, as something that when investigated deeply, the foundations of it don't make sense for that person. So the way I talk about evil when I talk about the epic or my own fiction or even the real world is pretty specific. The one Kai says, beyond stakes, what motivated which characters died? Philosophically, each death represents something different, as I went over. And the people who lived because they had different things to do from a storytelling perspective. Why reimagine Darkseid so differently from Kirby Morrison's cosmic archetype? Because I'm not doing archetypes in this story, dude. A couple of people asked about Darkseid's reimagining as a misguided, delusional, and ultimately fumbling and inadequate alien zealot warlord. And it's because he needs to represent something in this story. And in this story, the Darth Vader or Emperor Palpatine style character needs to be proven as a bag of hot air, because this story isn't about those stakes. This story is about the real stakes that define history, personal choices. Talker Dude Man asks, in Agent of Batman, how did Clark see through Clayface's disguise? What did he perceive? So Clark, as you'll recall, sees Clayface and immediately goes, what the fuck is that? And it's because he has very nominal super senses. So that means instantly the fact that Clayface, number one, has a Kryptonian energy signature because it has a weird electron field around it. Number two, is a solid instead of a living organism. Everything sets off alarm bells. He sees Clayface as a person that reads to him as a moving piece of furniture, and he immediately panics because he's never seen anything like that. CJ499 says, which planned characters were ultimately cut? Martian Manhunter? Hawkman, kind of. Normal Doomsday. That's it. Everyone else who I've said is going to appears. Epic Mafunum says, does the Spectre exist in the Epic? No. Jinx Inkscript 5667 says, why drop the idea of Vance putting the Batman helmet on Vandal and blowing it up? Because it's in it. One Shot New 6N says, if Clark had a child, would they be more like Billy and Wally? That question has an answer. Where did Bruce get the bright Superman style armor? He made it. Was Lex always meant to have that obnoxious dude bro laugh? I don't know if he has a dude bro laugh. Lex's laugh is deliberately evil. And it's because Lex, when a lot of times we see him, he's not super self-aware. So like, he has moments of self-awareness, but a lot of times Lex falls into this sort of big personality where he will, you know, like that laugh is meant to signal in his mind, that evil Lex laugh is meant to signal that he's ahead of you. It's almost an affectation that he does. Do Wally West and Barry Allen ever connect later? Yes. Kaject 97220 says, in a hypothetical film series, who's your ideal casting for Barry? Barry Allen, Bill Hader, I think would be great. I think Andrew Garfield would be incredible. I think a comedic performance from Christian Bale when he was younger would have been really great. I think a comedic performance from Tom Cruise would have been wonderful. There was a time, Nicolas Cage, a younger Nicolas Cage. It's that ability to be a leading man, but hide it, that's important for Barry. And never to outshine Clark. That he outshines Clark only in the sense that he says and does things that are more relatable to us than some of the choices Clark makes. Mr. Badgas says, if the work goes mainstream, would you do anything? Does that prospect give you anxiety? So a number of elements of my Superman and the Kryptonian Epic have already shown up in mainstream DC properties, most notably the cartoon My Adventures with Superman, which features a less powerful Superman alongside a black Jimmy Olsen and a Asian Lois Lane. What's mainstream? You know, when people talk about the Kryptonian Epic, it's so fucking weird. It really is just for you and me. Like the amount people make fun of me already, it appears they haven't even noticed or don't care or don't want to give the airtime to the fact that I've been dressing up in minimalist superhero costumes and yelling in dark rooms by myself for 4 years. I don't know what the Kryptonian Epic being mainstream even would look like, you know? Car Crash Jason says, explain the final line of Starlight Emperor. If I were Jon Snow, I'd be furious. It's because Clark does everything Jon Snow doesn't. He defeats evil, he gets the girl, and he conquers the various things in himself that had been holding him back, having to do with identity and his fears and anxieties. So if I was Jon Snow, I'd be fucking furious to see the epic of a hero really fucking do everything I didn't. Fiddler 1990 reads, have you read Wildbow's web serial Worm? I haven't. Rookie Candy 1011, would you work with the Epic's actors again? I already have a little bit, like Jane LeBron, Sarah Palednak, everybody. Bar Kim, Rocio de la Grana, everybody who came out and has been so wonderful in making the epic happen. I'd be willing to work with all of them again. Fojin asks, why Billy and Wally versus other youth pairings? Tim and Damien, Connor and Donna. To me, Billy and Wally are extra characters. Even in traditional DC, like Kid Flash and Captain Marvel are, like, they've been cool in things, and Wally was certainly a great Flash for a number of years. But what I like about them is they're both insanely powerful as any of the Justice League, but they're not really, you know, very rarely do you see Shazam standing next to Superman outside of Kingdom Come, especially in an adaptation or a comic, so an adaptation or a cartoon. So I needed people who represented raw power and whose powers could be tied back to Krypton. Fojin asks, can we get a definitive list of Bruce's mentors? No, come on now. Fojin asks, why avoid the name Doomsday using super hybrid given religious theming? Because super hybrid is what it really is. Doomsday is what Vandal and the more religious Darkseid, the more religiously minded characters of the epic would believe it is. Arthur would think that. But really, it's a super hybrid. It's a bunch of different things hybridized together going insane. They ask why no Lex interaction with Brainiac, really? Because it's not interesting to me. And it's been done a billion times. What became of Alfred, Mercy, and Barbara? What? Alfred was beaten savagely, barely survived, and then died of old age. Mercy was killed by Barbara off screen, and Barbara was beheaded by Wonder Woman. In the big fight in the Hyper District with the cool music where she has like the meltdown. Come on now. Kendall's YT asks, how did Clark survive the final flight through space back to Earth? Through the field and the magic field. You'll learn more about it soon. Ransom McCarthy 575 asks, which characters did you have to cut? Everyone asks that. I don't want to answer that. Ama Prime 7225 asks, how did the hybridization chamber end up in Themyscira? So, the Horizon pod, half of it built the home, the Fortress of Solitude in the Antarctic. Then that sent out, after years waiting, a little builder pod to build a giant array somewhere to contact Krypton. That array also was its own city because the builder pod had enough time to build it. And so it sort of malfunctioning built this whole city on the bottom of the ocean, Ryla, Atlantis. However, after it was done with that, it then went out and started cataloging all the different species, which is how ultimately Arthur becomes a hybrid of all those things. But after that, it ended up running out of energy and ending up on this island, and it built like a little hybridization pool, but at this point it's malfunctioning, and it built a hovering platform for the island to protect it and make it visual blind, and it sort of existed as kind of a half-built Kryptonian base inside of a volcano, but then the power finally ran out and it died. Razor's Edge 701. When did Arthur, Clark, Diana learn of Diana's Kryptonian connection? That would be in the wake of Starlight Emperor. We do not see them learn that. And on top of that, Clark is only putting together Aquaman's connection via his connection to the Fortress of Solitude and all that tech. So like, and also Clark can kind of feel that Diana's field is a little off. Even though her powers aren't as based in the field, she's super hybridized with herself and basically a human being's DNA layered over itself, which is why she's so dense and hard to injure. But they kind of, that's actually an interesting question. I guess they know by the time of Last Sun. Okay. If Clark's powers are photosynthetic EM fields, why does Zod need hybridization? What's the mechanism? Well, the mechanism of hybridization is also photosynthetic, powered by the sun, like everything in the Fortress of Solitude. It's the sun and a nugget of green 71 and somewhere in all that ice. So everything it does supercharges stuff with the same type of energy. Dave Shovel asks, what's next after the Epic? Are you going to visit Comic-Cons? No. Comic Nerd 1103 says, what happened to Selina after Batman Death Wish? She got the fuck out of Dodge. Was never seen again. Comic Nerd 1103 says, how would Jor-El react to meeting Clark and to Diana and Arthur as his children? He'd be fucking overjoyed. It's beyond anything he imagined. He would be amazed by all of the hybrids, especially the hybrids that were done as adults. I think Jor-El would be really fascinated specifically by the Parasite and Man-Bat and Barbara being able to shift back and forth between her two genetic phenotypes, from Barbara to the cheetah monster and back. Like, Jor-El would be in heaven. He would love Clark. Clark's everything he dreamed this technology could do. Weird Voyager says, oh, I already said that. Monarch of Llamas 2150 says, how will you feel when the Epic is fully done? And will another project ever take up this much time? I think I'll feel really good. I felt really good after Starlight. And no, I would hope the next thing I'm doing that takes up this much time, someone's paying me for, and I'm not paying for. Darth Madara asks, which plot points were I already know that. The Nemi Bro asks, will you release the unfinished animated Epic or Starlight Emperor storyboards? Yes, I will, I decided. I will, with David North's narration, probably. Wolfman Jack asks, are there in-universe Zatanna truthers decoding her lyrics and symbolism? Yes. There are multiple in-universe cults based around most of the heroes. However, public declarations by the heroes that they disavow those cults have made it hard for them to function with impunity. Fresh News 247, was there a hand of God that kicked off your DCU? Yes. It was seeing Man of Steel. I was like, something's really wrong. Dishonest Honest 1327. If Arthur were fully submerged, would he fare better against Doomsday? Yes. Arthur alone in the ocean could have taken on Doomsday by himself. However, there was no convenient moment where Doomsday's combination of incredible mobility and speed, as well as unpredictability and physical durability, made that possible. But yes, Arthur in the ocean could have taken on Doomsday by himself, probably. It would have been bad, but he would have won. Michael Winchester says, will Dick start a Teen Titans with Shazam and Wally? First of all, Shazam's not in the story. Second of all, no. Kendall YT's ask, was Clark's adult Kryptonian fit, the crazy like Doom Balenciaga look he wears, was it grown from his body, and how did it take it off? Yes, it was grown from his DNA. He took it off like clothes. He peeled it off. It was sticky. Wolfman Jack asks, what becomes of Harvey Dent? Whatever becomes of Harvey Dent and the last son of Krypton. Mr. T. Logan says, will any of the Epic be published? Absolutely not. Bennett 4789 says, what became of the Area 51 experiments on Darkseid? Did they inspire Garrett's suit? Was LexCorp involved? Yes, the Darkseid experiments and his ship experiments ended up with Dan and two other scientists, and I made an Armors video, but I need to clear up the audio on it because I actually go really deep into that, and I don't want to explain it here. GSG-PB7KG asks, how much of this was planned from when you wrote American Alien? I would say 25 to 40%. Wolfman Jack, still him. This guy's cornered me. I don't want to answer any more of his question. Benjamin, how old are the main characters across the timeline? How long between AA and Starlight? So from the first issue of AA to Starlight Emperor is about 25 years. Because Clark ends it at like 37, 38. And Batman is in his early 40s. And the majority of everything basically, American Alien's kickoffs happen kind of near the end of his 20s. He's already got the full Superman suit. And the encounter with Lobo happens when he's like 28. And then he spends a year and a half, almost 2 years being trained by Bruce, which is mostly off screen, but then we pick up with Agent of Batman, and that's sort of our kickoff back into the world. And then between Agent and Batman and the end of Starlight is like 8 years. Right, 7 or 8 years. 7 years, I would say. But then if you look at it in both directions and you get into like the Queen Prince, you can say really 10 years is the whole epic, but the Superman story is really between 7 and 9 years, and it's between when he's 28 and 38. It's like, it's that, and sort of adjust everyone around that. Bruce is 2 years older than Clark, which is what makes it so embarrassing that they mistake him on the yacht for a guy who isn't even the correct age. Dude 10067 asks, why weren't you credited on Superman Man of Tomorrow if it drew from American Alien? And the answer is because they don't have to credit any of the authors they draw from, because Superman is a character they own. So unfortunately, you'll notice that very often when comic book storylines are adapted, they don't, if it's a mix of different storylines like Man of Tomorrow is, because Man of Tomorrow is not strictly American Alien, it just takes some of the ideas from it, which, show up in a lot of places in DC. But yeah, I'm not credited because it's normal to not credit someone unless you're adapting a specific storyline. Spider Variant 96 asks, will you release finished animations plus scrapped ideas in one video? Maybe, yeah. James Offer 6758 says, is Little Lex Big Lex a riff on inner child therapy in your kryptonite spear and bullets short? Yes, it is. It is about the unhealed emotional inner child having its decisions dictated by the out of control ego. And Lex is a deeply, deeply psychologically flawed person who has a justification mechanism of this will all be okay. Everything I do will be okay once I'm in charge of the world. On the Jazz 247 asks, what happens now? I'm back to work as a screenwriter. So if the film industry survives, hopefully more movies and the end of the Kryptonian Epic, as well as more terrible Instagram stories I do while I'm high. Kyle Hinson says, will you do any other fan fiction beyond DC? No. Philip Jordan Huertas says, what inspired the super hybrid's design versus classic humanoid Doomsday? So the super hybrid needed to be a flailing out of control monster. I made fun of Doomsday's design and called him a gray Hulk in my video, The Death and Return of Superman, where I dramatized that because I really feel Doomsday's design is not impressive. The fact that ultimately the creature that killed Superman was a thug who looked like Solomon Grundy or Hulk or The Thing or any number of the other sort of Brock Lesnar's of the comic book world, I thought was very disappointed. So Doomsday's design is by the brilliant David North, and I wanted it to be this little body with these flailing limbs and this King Kong sized. You can't do anything to it. You don't even know what part of it to hit. The center of it is all mouth, and the arms are all claws, so there's no way you can even... If you interact with it, you're getting hit from up here because it's like a wacky arm flailing tube man. And then sort of the design of how it moves is based on, if you've ever seen the classic animation, the St. James Infirmary. And that's why I wanted it to be an out of control monster that represented everything scary about a rampaging animal. Michael Bezone says, before scanning the Kents, was Clark just a seed, a plant baby, or something else? Clark was a seed. And then the DNA got folded in. Kryptonians, you ask all your friends for their DNA if you admire your friends. So Kryptonian babies have a lot of different parents, and then they have the parent or 3-parent or 1-parent raising them. But Kryptonians are like plants, so they take a bunch of DNA from different people. So like Clark ended up being just Jor-El and the Kents. And that's why Clark is Clark. Although for a minute when he was transforming, it looked all crazy with vines all over it. Ghost Melon says, which Justice Society members do what drugs? Did Arthur use pufferfish? Clark did acid once. Ollie does coke and edibles. Clark also talks about doing mushrooms. He also has a dissociative experience on the Crane fear gas. Zatanna has tried pretty much every drug and is a former meth and crack addict and heroin addict. During her time in Bloodhaven before she dug herself out of it. Ted does not do drugs other than painkillers, which he's addicted to or was addicted to. And he used them to numb out, but he fell out of that as he became the Blue Beetle. Lois has done most drugs that a person might do at a party. Who else? Who else does drugs? Ollie experiments with drugs. We see him on Molly and Endangered Species. Clark has experimented with most drugs. They all have done a lot of drugs. These characters have done a lot of drugs, and they do a lot of drugs in the epic. Kind of crazy. Real Proto Mike says, why do you keep your props on the floor instead of a small table? Because I always wanted to have cuts and not have them be in frame, and I hate when you can see them by my feet. Anonymously, A Moose says, would you tackle a Marvel Universe epic? Who would be its Superman? I already did one, and the Superman was Herman Schultz, the Shocker. For Super Gamma asks, could Aaron Scott ever be reasoned with? Was he insane or performing Joker as a character? Great question. Aaron could not be reasoned with. In as much as you could probably get him, if you could pitch him a different terrorist attack, he might listen to that because he was open to collaboration. But Aaron is an interesting riff on the Joker. It was important to me to not make him cool because I find the Joker to be kind of cool. He's like the ultimate rebel cavalier, does whatever he wants. Efforts to make him darker or scarier, cutting his face off, only seem to make him more cool. Efforts to make him gruesome, like the one featured in the Pattinson Batman, I don't feel work. I wanted to make him reprehensible. Fucking-hensible. And a direct mirror to my version of Batman. Because my version of Batman has dissociative identity disorder and is having a mental breakdown. Aaron's choosing to be like that. It's a role he's performing. And he's validated because he becomes insanely famous. And every theory Aaron had about the world, he feels is proven correct. The only L's he takes are his disappointment in Batman as a artistic symbol, and then his violent death at the hands of Lois Lane. Aaron is miserable to be killed. Even though he doesn't get to beg or cry or anything, after that first hit with the crowbar, he's aware internally that it's Lois who's doing it, that it's the crowbar he brought, that he took his eye off the ball. He dies miserable, frustrated, and impotent after a life of making other people feel the same way and laughing at them. I mean, evil is a stretch, but I don't think you could reckon with him because he's just a piece of shit. He's a pretentious piece of shit. Joe Jomez says, when did the switch from Batman's Justice League to Luthor's Justice League occur conceptually and why? So they're kind of the same thing. Batman manipulates Luthor. Okay. So Batman, they're kind of the same thing. It was a conceptual change, but the people and places like John Constantine and Aquaman and all of the various things that Luthor discovered in the run-up to forming his Justice League was put together from Bruce Wayne's research. In the same way that Bruce Wayne ended up stealing research from Dan Garrett done under Luthor to do Batman stuff. So there's a lot of incestual corporate espionage stuff there that I could do a video about, but it's hard. Needless to say, I changed it because I realized that ultimately I needed Lex to be more in charge because Batman was going to be gone by then. And I didn't want echoes of Batman happening inside of Manchester or Barry or Diana. Their arcs were too important. Connor Norton says, what was Vandal doing during the 9 hours Riddler distracted the base mine? He was hiding. And he was watching. He still has access to some of his base mind powers, so he was understanding what was happening in the world and trying to understand how everything happening now played into the prophecy. And you'll notice Vandal doesn't reappear and doesn't do anything until Hardcastle and the military shows up. Because to Vandal, they're not involved in the prophecy, so he needs to stop them to stop everything from playing out wrong. Because Vandal just backs off once he lets out Doomsday and assumes that everything is playing out how it's supposed to. There's the thing in the sky and seems like fire and brimstone. But once the military is showing up to maybe ruin the party, Vandal's a fake and a fraud. And even though he's a true believer, ultimately it's about what he wants and his impulses, and he interferes in his own prophecy. And it doesn't go well for him. Purcell Worthman, 3199. Tell us more about the Penguin. You've mentioned that he exists, but we know little. That's because Oswald Cobblepot is very much like the Oswald Cobblepot featured in The Batman and the Penguin on HBO. He is a ugly criminal who, in the wake of the various crime families being crushed by Bruce Wayne's Batman, using Matches Malone, being absolutely crushed, and the wake of Harvey Dent's burning and subsequent rampage, a lot of the remaining mobsters in Gotham adopted super villain adjacent identities like Maxie Zeus and the Penguin. They are not important characters, and I did not think about them a lot. They are meant to be symptomatic of the broader psychosis that Batman introduces, the superhero psychosis. Spinnaker 10 asks, beyond Dick, does Bruce reconcile or apologize to Jim, Selina, Harvey, or Barbara? Jim, Selina, no. Harvey and Barbara, give it a minute. Wolfman Jack asks, how do you treat killing or murder? The no-kill rule, yet heroes still take lives at times. I did like a normal epic story. There are no rules in the Kryptonian Epic. People can just get killed randomly. Superman fuck up and kill you. And if you take that off the table, you're sort of storytelling with training wheels on. You're sort of like bowling with bumpers. So the who kills and who doesn't kill rule really became incredibly liquid to me because it was more about the message character-wise of the story than superhero storytelling. Car Crash Jason, or actually a couple people have asked this. Can you explain the Vandal Savage Martha Kent meeting? Timing, motives, why spare her? Did he know the pod was swapped? The pod had not yet been swapped when Vandal was there. No, it had, because Clark was away at college. So college means Clark, yeah, okay. So the pod had already been swapped when Vandal was there, and he had gotten messages from the Brainiac nanites inside him that something had landed here that had to do with him. And Vandal has no map of the Earth, so he does a lot of wandering around. And the meteor shower in Smallville is actually kind of famous. So even though the majority of what came down was debris that was struck, satellites and stuff that came down with Clark when he came. So they call it a meteor shower, but really it was a cover-up. And the sort of confrontation between him and Martha is peak Vandal. It's Vandal wandering through a story, not sure what it means to him, and it's an Anton Chigurh coin flip as to who he kills, whether or not he kills who he's talking to. You'll notice that Vandal and Clark never appear in the same scene. They're never in the same place at the same time. And that was very intentional. And yes, Martha told Clark that a guy had been asking about him, and he eventually assumed that guy was Batman, but it was not. Jason Francesi, 839, says, which characters in universe are Carly Rae Jepsen fans? So obviously Jimmy. I would say probably also Z, just because she can create music spontaneously, but she needs inspirations. Fiddler 1990 says, what happened to Nora Fries? Nora Fries, undersung hero of the epic, helps lock Clark and Jimmy in a closet with Iris Allen in Freeze test run. The wives of my two brilliant geniuses. They're such fun characters, Iris and Nora, and I never got to play with them really in a video because there was never any room without it feeling like there's cutting room floor stuff somewhere. But Nora goes on to run the Freeze Foundation and is essentially a humanitarian and a beloved figure in global culture because of the 0 point generators. The fact that she lifted the world out of poverty and hunger and made us a spacefaring utopia, or her husband did. But Nora becomes like the face of that. Whereas Iris becomes an increasingly notorious public character because, Barry's still alive and now she's the richest woman in the world. I love Iris Allen. I'm sad I never got to play with her. What became of the people Oliver saved on the island? Well, they'd be in it a lot, but I don't have room for them. But they're always, you see them every once in a while, get updates on them. They're both okay and they're doing good. What's the most important thing about the epic to you? Philosophically, that it's about kindness and about all of the characters who choose kindness, even if short-term there's pain and suffering, long term it works out better. And then to me personally, the fact that I finished it, even in its weird format. As a writer, I've always said that what makes a writer is not writing, it's finishing. And the fact that I did this crazy thing, it feels good. It feels great. And I'm glad you care. Ant GM93 says, will you do a dramatic what if where Lex enters Themyscira's pool and his balls explode? No, but it almost happens. It comes this close to happening in the island issue of Z the Magical Girl. Because he steps in, I forget what that issue is called. What's her, Athena, I think it's called. But when she goes to Themyscira, there is a part where Langstrom and Constantine and Z and Lex are all around the pool in the volcano, and Lex sticks his foot in and then takes his foot out and goes, why don't we have one of the test subjects try it first? But yeah, his balls almost explode, but I never got to pitch that scene. Penguin questions again. Bowler Hat Films and Reviews 2778 says, why omit General Sam Lane from the Epic? Because Lois is too important to me, and I have other stuff. I have other people to fill that role. Lois's parents are not important to me. This isn't fucking the Hulk. We got a couple of questions about Edward Crane, Jonathan's brother. Why did Barry tolerate him at Ace but not Jonathan? That is because Edward Crane was a psychopharmacologist alongside Jonathan Crane, who did a bunch of studying on unlocking deeper areas of the mind, but then they were working together, and Edward actually disavowed Jonathan at the height of their research when they made this drug that was shown to clinically clear depression in veterans and heal PTSD. But then one of the side effects was revealed, like 1 in every 10 people who did it killed themselves and killed everyone around them. Edward disavowed the study and quit science and was shamed, but Jonathan Crane continued the fucking experiments as the Scarecrow and went insane and was attacked by the Batman. So Barry thinks of Edward, who's actually murdered by Jonathan. He thinks of Edward as a person like him who's disgraced to the public, but has the right kind of intentions in the same way that he respects Langstrom. Whereas Jonathan Crane is a straight up terrorist. Barry seeing Jonathan there is even, you see him remember it in deposition. It's the first time he goes, oh, I knew I was a criminal. I didn't realize I was a villain. I didn't realize I'm on the team of the actual real bad guys. And then the weapons technology element makes that worse. And it's what leads Barry and Victor initially to try to contact Jack and then Jimmy, and it leads to the Ace Chemicals incident. So for me, that whole sort of dynamic had to be really thought through. Andrew YM2GW says, did Lex know the fortress portal led to Metropolis, and does he grapple with causing that destruction? No, he did not. Once it opened, he did realize that, but he completely disavows it, and they don't ever find out that he's the one who did it. Wolfman Jack is the number one asker, but he says, there's so many questions this guy asked, I can't answer them all, but why do otherness and outsider themes recur across your work? Oh, gee, I wonder. A outsider who's socially isolated has a special talent that ultimately leads to acceptance and success, or chaos and disaster if they don't heal the personal things within themselves. I don't know. I deal with a lot of characters who have complicated parental legacies as well. What's that about? A lot of my leads are white men. What could be happening there? Otherness and identity are a theme in all my work because I think they are a central theme, unacknowledged often theme in the human experience. I think figuring out who you are and knowing that you are actually no one and that you are mutable and that you are the expression of your values through your actions, and taking accountability for that and where that places you in your life, with your friends, in your society, in your systems, in your structures of power. The isolation creates interesting reflections that everyday Joe, protagonist Jim from The Office, usually don't have. So when you look at Dirk or Mike Howell or Francis Minch from Mr. Right or Andrew from Chronicle, or, Igor and Victor from Frankenstein, Gabby from Me, Him, Her, the leads of Channel Zero, the Everything I Do, Shadow in the Cloud, Bright even, although the movie does this less, Jacoby and Bright. Outsiders and exiles, they play well. You can explore more with them. You can explore more from the outside. And it's a position emotionally that I'm familiar with. Petey Joe 4659 asks, was it Mr. Mxyzptlk who gave Z her powers? Sort of. Mr. Mxyzptlk is a very specific character and tool in the epic. And he only shows up 3 times. All 3 times he shows up are canon, but they bring up a crazy kind of question about the epic that is not meant to have a clear answer. Pietro Casella asks, Barry's time stop with Darkseid felt Speed Forcey. Was that a narrative device or tech actually affecting time? It was a narrative device, really. It's literal, but he's not actually saying all that because Barry's kind of having a seizure during that. But he did run right up to Darkseid and he's perceiving time slowly. So we're kind of hearing that catharsis because it's important. But it's also just a cool scene. I mean, I don't know. I thought it was cool. Do you personally relate to any of these characters, heroes or villains? All of them. Could Andrew, Jesse 8924 says, could Andrew from Chronicle take your Superman 1v1? Not a chance. Andrew couldn't beat up Clark as a little kid. Ultra Boy 2669 says, will there be a Wrestling Isn't Wrestling Part 2? I don't know, man. I don't think so. Maybe in Saudi. Maybe I'll do it for the Riyadh Comedy Festival. KFC Famous Bull says, with your different dark side, did you consider using more new gods? No. G-Rez says, why were Lois and Clark fired for lies and how were they rehired pre-Starlight Emperor? What happened in the gap? They were not rehired pre-Starlight Emperor. Lois just goes physically to the Daily Planet. They are not rehired. And they are fired by Perry because they fucking hid the fact that Clark was Superman, which would be a pretty fucking relevant thing in, I don't know, 2/3 of the news they've reported on in the last 8 years. Like, if Lois knew that, post the night of the Killing Joke, when Jim Gordon was kidnapped, the first thing as a reporter Lois should have done is, well, Clark, you can't be Superman anymore. We have to immediately come out but they got trauma bonded together in that Gotham hospital. And it didn't play out that way. And Lois found herself keeping secrets that she resented. And by the time you get to Endangered Species, Lois is living in a shell of the life she wanted. We hear her in Starlight Emperor say, I don't want to be Superman's fiance. And the fact that they, for personal reasons, hid the fact that they were among the most consequential people in the world and making decisions that were life and death for hundreds, if not thousands or millions of people. Yeah, you get fired, and they're lucky they didn't get sued into fucking oblivion, honestly. G. Colvin asks, what happened to Jervis Tetch? And Meximatic asks, who did we forget about? You'll see me soon enough. I've been working really hard. They all forgot about me! You'll see. Did Dick, Real Proto Mike says, did Dick ever find Ted Remains? Yes, we see him find them within Starlight Emperor. That's a scene you just didn't notice. And did he tell Z, could they bond into a relationship? Yes, they could. Last two. Clark died and returned in hours. How does that affect the spiritual weight of the S and life after proving near unkillable? You will find out in whatever happened to the last son of Krypton. And lastly, I've been asked one more, why give Floyd so many chances to walk away? And I talked about that earlier. Ultimately, ideally, the thing that makes the Kryptonian Epic special is that the choices matter. Choices characters make play out all throughout the epic. minor characters, major characters, big choices, little choices. If you go back and you find a way to watch this all, sequentially or otherwise, you will see that I really have planned out each character to have a message that can be summed up in a sentence. Floyd is a capitalist. He is a man with a skill and no compunction about using that skill. He kills people, and he's good at it, and he deserves to be paid for it. And he's like Michael Jordan. He wants to be at the highest level of people who kill people. He's not necessarily a malicious guy. He is not a serial killer. He does not randomly murder people he runs into. He is not evil in the way a Gerard Schugel is, where he is trying to do experiments on big groups of people. He's not evil in the flagrant and random way Vandal Savage is, where he's murdering everyone he encounters. He's not evil in the way Lex is, where he wants to take over the world. He's not evil in the way Aaron is, where Aaron wants to make an artistic statement and be venerated above everything. He values that more than every life on earth. Floyd loves money, and he loves to get money and spend money, and he doesn't ever want to have kids. He wants to be the best who ever did it and then retire. Yeah, he put on a costume and he's dead shot, but that's just because, after Slade did it, what does being the best mean? Cutting edge. This Batman creep's got people thinking he's a vampire. I got to figure out something for me. So Floyd is corrupt and awful, but he's not evil. And Floyd's death, that final moment where outside in the street as the National Guard is coming and Floyd reveals he's going to shoot out with the National Guard after they've shot Ted and shot Zatanna and it's total chaos, after Floyd has done so many murders and spent so much time and survived the Ace Chemicals incident and did all this incredible stuff and survived the encounter with the Riddler, inspired Eddie to become the Riddler. Floyd ultimately is put into a position where he could just surrender. He could just end it. But even then, that would never occur to Floyd because he has such contempt and derision for people who don't think the way he does. He'll kill you. He'll kill you, not because he hates you, but because you don't fit into the math of him being paid. Lex needs a knight. He needs Lancelot. He's King Arthur. He needs a Lancelot that doesn't fuck his wife, and that's Floyd. And it's interesting that was asked, and that's the last question I'm going to answer, because that is really intentional. And a lot of the choices in the epic are things I thought a lot about, especially what happens to the bad guys, or how bad guys become good guys, or gray guys become good guys or bad guys. A lot of that thinking is about what the character represents. Floyd represents greed, and he represents the capitalist system taken to a nihilistic, cynical, homicidal extreme. And that is why Clark just straight up kills him, is that system ultimately will leverage people into inhumane positions. And Clark is leveraged into a position of, I cripple this guy and he becomes a problem somehow down the road again, or he kills people here now. He has all these weapons. Clark is leveraged into a horrible position by Floyd's capitalism. So we're back to talking about politics, but capitalism will always have an underclass who gets fucked, and Floyd will do anything to stay on top, and he thinks that makes him right, and he's wrong. This has been, hopefully we'll cut this down to the point it will be neat, but this has been glasses-wearing Max Landis doing a incredibly long Q&A with lots of people asked. I feel like one or two guys asked 70 questions, and then the rest of the people asked the other 200 some. But I feel like I did pretty good answering them, and I hope you enjoyed this, and it gave you a window into my process. And if you enjoyed the Kryptonian Epic, or you haven't started watching it yet, maybe you should dive in. Thank you so much. Follow me on Instagram at UpToMyKnees1985, and there will be new podcasts and content on this channel soon. Peace.